Alright, I'm gonna try and make this work. I've recorded this thing like 2 times and the audio is so freaking bad with this microphone. I don't know if I need to just scrap it or what. Anyway, within the last few weeks, I made a custom steering wheel for my girlfriend's Wii that I got her for Christmas. You can still get them on Amazon for like 15 bucks, but why not spend 2 weeks of my life and like $30 in filament and just do it myself? You know what I'm saying? To get started, I took all the measurements off of her actual Wii controller and I got the dimensions as well as the all the curves and the fillets and all that kind of stuff, and I modeled one in Fusions. That way I had something to build the actual 3D model off of for the steering wheel. So once I had that, I went ahead and made a block with a negative in it that would actually hold the controller, and I went ahead and I printed that out and just tested to make sure that the real controller was going to fit in there. And you can see I intentionally made the hole just a tad bit too big for the controller, so it's a little bit wobbly and it also just falls out. So the next thing I did was I added these little spring tabs in there, really simple. It took maybe a total of like 10 minutes or something. So then once I had those modeled, then I went ahead and printed that out, that same block, but with these spring tabs. So I knew that the spring tabs were going to work. And then you can see I've got a hole in the back, just like the actual Nintendo steering wheel. It's got this hole in the back that you can put the wrist strap through, and then also it allows you to push your finger through so you can actually get the remote out. Once I had that done, all of the tricky stuff was done except for the button on the back. I wanted the controller to be fully enclosed in the steering wheel, so it felt more like a real steering wheel. And so in order to do that, I needed a button on the steering wheel that would actually interact and push the button on the controller. But in order to do that, I wanted to wait until I had the full form of the steering wheel, so that way I could kind of form the button to match that and kind of blend that a little bit better, as opposed to making the button and then try and like form the steering wheel around the button, if that makes sense, because I didn't know where the button was going to sit. Anyway, that's besides the point. So I waited for the button. Everything else was done. It was all aesthetic stuff now, making the actual shape of the steering wheel. And I actually used the Nintendo steering wheel as a reference. You'll see as this goes on, it's not super different than just a regular Nintendo steering wheel. It just kind of adds some like accent pieces, and it's like a little bit fancier as far as the styling goes, but like the overall shape and everything is generally the same. It was more just like a challenge for me as far as like the modeling goes. But at first I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to do this, but I just kind of started with the really, really basic shapes, like you do anything in modeling or in drawing or whatever you're doing. I started with really basic shapes and just kind of blocked everything out, and I just kept cutting stuff and filleting stuff and chamfering stuff until it slowly kind of started to come together. And then once I had the shape of the steering wheel completely done, I went ahead and got to the button. And for the button, it posed a little bit of a challenge, but in the end, it ended up being a super, super simple solution. Basically, my first idea was to have the button pretty much just pivot. And so it had these two little nubs on it, and it would click into place. And it just had this tab that would come through the bottom of the steering wheel, and it was my initial idea was that it would rotate and press the button on the controller. In the end, if I really wanted that to work, I was going to have to stretch those holes, that not only the hole that fit the slot in the steering wheel, but also the hole that held the button. I was going to have to stretch those in order to get that full range of motion, and I didn't think it was going to look that well. Then I had the idea to just take the exact same button that I had. I didn't change the model at all. So same button with the nubs on the side, and instead of just holes in the steering wheel and it pivoting, I just made them slots. And so once it clicked into place, it could just slide up and down. It just uses the actual tension from the button on the controller to kind of hold it in place. And then once the controller's in, it works is what I'm trying to say. So I did some accent pieces, just made little plates with that were kind of inset into the steering wheel. She wanted two things. Well, she wanted three things. She wanted a black steering wheel with light blue accents because her controller that she uses is light blue. She wanted somewhere on it to say that she's number one, so that way everybody knew. And then she wanted her name to be on it. I started with the front. I just made a little center cap, and I figured we would put the number one front and center, so that way we pick it up. It'd be the first thing you're looking at when you're holding this thing. Then I flipped it over to the back, and I didn't really have any sort of idea when I started doing this, but I wanted to have her name on the back, and then I wanted to just have some sort of like plate, like badge thing that would kind of just, I don't know, just look stylish or whatever. And so I just kind of messed around with the shape until I found something. And Yeah, so I've got like a badge plate, and then there's like the name plate on the inside. And they're two separate pieces, but like I said, they're just super glued in. And it was right about this point that my microphone died or disconnected, or I don't know what happened, but I guess I'm gonna have to get a new one. Yeah, at this point, the modeling was finally done, and I was left with trying to figure out how to print this thing. It had so many harsh curves, I couldn't really just lay it flat on the build plate and print it that way. I tried to, but there just wasn't enough supports in the world to try and get that initial curve of the actual steering wheel handle started. The first print face down just had so many defects. They mixed with the first layer, and so everything got fused together. It was going to take a whole lot of cleanup, so printing it face down was not going to be an option. Then I decided to tilt it up at a 45-degree angle and try and print it that way with just a bunch of supports, and that ended up still posing an issue. It was better, but I still had the issue of there was big gaps in a lot of the layer lines and stuff where stuff really just wasn't sticking. There was a lot of support scarring, and the long stretches where the hole for the controller just didn't print well. There was a big sag in the middle. It just wasn't going to work. So at this point, I decided maybe it was time to use my resin printer. I haven't used it in like 8 months since whenever I got my K1 Max, and so I decided to go ahead and print it on the resin printer. I kind of figured that this steering wheel project might be perfect for a resin print. So long story short, after probably about 5 failed attempts of something completely different going wrong every single time, I no longer have a resin printer, and it is now in a pile of parts in a tub on my floor, and I'll just put them in storage and kind of pull stuff when I think I might need it. Printer was out of the picture. I was gonna have to use FDM. So again, one of those things, I don't know why I didn't think of it in the first place. I did the exact same thing. I tilted it up at a 45, but then I also tilted it like this at a 45, so that way all of the flat spaces here, they were all stacked on each other, so that way they could kind of go up at a 45, and they had enough support where the supports on the model didn't really do anything aside from holding the model up like that. But yeah, anyway, more explanation than you probably needed, but yeah, that's what I ended up doing. And then once I had all the test prints out of the way, and I knew this thing was going to print right, then I finally printed it in the actual color that I was going to use, which was this matte black Overture PLA. I've been using Overture's matte PLA more and more recently. I love the colors. That's also what this blue is, by the way. But I love the colors. I love how matte it is. It prints super, super nicely. So, yeah, pretty dope. Yeah, got all that printed out, got everything put together. Like I said, it's all just super glued, and then the button actually just clicks into place. So I did a little bit of cleanup. Of course, I accidentally deleted the video of it, but like, I don't know if you can see that. There was some scarring from the supports and everything that were left on like the very beginning of the print. This is where it was like kind of sitting on the build plate, and all I did was just take a file and just file everything as smooth as I could get it, and then just kind of very, very lightly, quickly graze over it with a lighter, and just kind of let the flame just kind of blend all that, because like when you sand stuff, it'll kind of get like light, and it was really noticeable. And so I would just kind of let the lighter just very gently melt everything back to like a nice dark black, and it really worked pretty well. I mean, overall, this thing came out almost perfect aside from that little bit of scarring. So I am very happy with it, especially after two or 3 weeks of messing with this thing. I'm finally happy to have it done. I don't know exactly how detailed to make this thing. I don't know what the line is between making it informative and kind of actually showing you my process before it starts to get too boring and me just rambling on about every little detail and it just being dumb and people clicking off. So but yeah, that's what I did. I did want to say we're almost at 500 subscribers now, which is really cool, and I really appreciate everybody subscribing and showing their support and showing their interest in what I'm doing and everything. It's really cool, and I appreciate it. With that being said, I did want to talk about kind of the future of this channel and like from here on what I'm going to be posting, the kind of projects I'm going to be doing and stuff like that. If you've been subscribed for a while, you'll remember that like way back I used to only post art videos, and I really want to get back into that. I haven't drawn like sat down and just drawn something in a really long time, and I used to be really into like animating, and I miss doing that, and I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to do before I stopped drawing and stopped animating. So yeah, art. If you're subscribed for the art and that sounds cool to you, That's awesome. Thank you for the support. If you came for something else, sorry about that. I don't know. With that being said, I finally have an online store now. The link will be in the description, but I've got all kinds of prints, you know, Spider-Man, Deku, Castle. Come on. I've just been rambling for too long at this point. Yeah, online store, link in the description. I'll probably put a link to like the Overture PLA that I use because it's really cool and you should buy it. And great.